on and on for this topic. So I'm going to ask the organizers, Vaidehi, Rajsi, Swati, to please stop me when you think that I have already said too much. And we can move on to the questions anytime in between in the talk. The structure of the talk is that we'll talk a little bit about the numbers which surround abortion globally and in India. We'll then talk a little bit about the MTP Act of India, and then we will talk about uh, how there are some acts which have caused unintended consequences. For example, the POXO Act, the PNDT Act, and then we'll round up that section of the talk by talking a little bit on the current amendments which have been tabled and passed in the Lok Sabha, the MTP Act 2022 with. We will then follow this by some tips and guidelines on how to do MTPs in practice. What is the current way we in India are doing MTPs in practice? And then we will finish up by talking a little bit about how to provide abortions in the current scenario that we are in. Although I must say before I begin that I hope everybody is healthy and safe. And of course, we all pray that this current pandemic and this current scenario ends sooner rather than later. I'm an optimist. I see light at the end of the tunnel, particularly in the way this pandemic has been managed so far in India. And I must say that I never expected, and I am pleasantly surprised, almost thrilled about the way our systems, our governments, our health systems are managing this pandemic. There will always be shortcomings. There will always be shortcomings. There will always be something to complain about. But so far, I'm keeping my fingers crossed and touch wood. So far, India is actually doing better than quite rest of the world. And, because I keep on talking, as Vaidi and Swati told you, I'm running a 10-country project for FIGO. And when I speak to people in other countries, I realize how well we are doing because of whatever measures have been taken so far. So having said that, let's dive into the topic quite directly. I have the clock in front of me. It's 4:40 now, and I hope to finish by around 5:20. I hope that's okay, Vaidhi. So let me start first by congratulating all of you. And the reason for this congratulations is in this slide, which says that India currently has the lowest ever maternal mortality recorded in its living history. We have never had a mortality from mothers which is as low as it is today. So, sometimes I think that we don't appreciate ourselves enough. And ultimately, who delivers women? We deliver women. And I think it's time sometimes to step back, give ourselves a pat on the back. And I know that everybody is on Zoom and not live, but still, please put your hands together and congratulate yourself for achieving what is currently the lowest mortality for mothers ever in our country. Having said that, however, there are and there always will be gaps. I'm going to start this presentation with a story, and I'm going to end this presentation with a story. So my presentation is actually bookended by two stories. And I hope that all of you will keep these stories in mind when you listen to the presentation. This story is the story of a 12-year-old girl living in a small village somewhere in our country. The girl is 12 years old. Her parents are daily wage workers. They go every day to the fields to work, earn their daily wages, and innocently leave the girl with an uncle. This uncle, unfortunately, turns out to be a pedophile and a predator of the worst type. And he repeatedly rapes this girl, repeatedly. Over a period of 2 to 3 months, this girl is subjected to the most vile abuse by this trusted relative. And of course, as luck would have it, after 3 or 4 months of this abuse, she gets pregnant. Because she is not aware, because she thinks at this age periods may be delayed sometimes, and simply because she lacks the courage to speak out against someone who is seen as trusted within the family. By the time she tells her mother that her periods have not come, She's already 24 weeks pregnant. The girl's parents, of course, are shocked. They take her to the hospital, the primary health center, and are told that India's MTP Act allows abortions to be performed only up to 20 weeks. They then go to the court and they start the rounds. They go to the lower court, then they go to the high court, they go to the Supreme Court. But unfortunately, by the time the case reaches the Supreme Court, she's already 32 weeks pregnant. And at this time, the Supreme Court says, well, we are very sorry, but you're already 32 weeks pregnant and we cannot allow an abortion at this point in time. Imagine the plight of this poor girl. She's 12 years old. At 24 weeks, a pregnancy was discovered. And because of the way our acts are written, at 32 weeks, when she finally reaches Supreme Court, she's told that we are sorry, but you will have to go to term with the pregnancy and in all likelihood have a cesarean section. This is the state of affairs which sometimes comes about when abortion laws don't keep up with time and there is inadequate access to abortion. I would like you to really think about this 12-year-old girl and keep her in mind and so many hundreds of other girls and women like her when you listen to this presentation, because that is when you realize how important providing abortion is. It's estimated that from all the pregnancies that occur in the world, 44% are unintended. That's close to half of all pregnancies that occur. And from all the unintended pregnancies that occur, 55% of them end up in abortion in developing regions. This translates into 55.7 million abortions in the world. Just think about the numbers. 55.7 million abortions take place every year in the world, of which almost half are unsafe. Look at what our women are putting themselves through simply because they have an unmet need for contraception and they have a biological function that they did not really ask for in the first place. How many abortions in India per year? If you look at the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare website, it estimates something like 1.5 to 5 million abortions every year in India. But there is a study from the Guttmacher Foundation, which is a fairly well-researched, fairly rigorous study methodology reported in the Lancet in 2018. And this study estimates that there are 15.6 million abortions in India every year, which means 1/3 of all pregnancies which occur in India end in an abortion. But more importantly, out of all these abortions, only 3.4 million abortions take place in health facilities, which means that as of now, more abortions are taking place outside health facilities than within the health facility. And again, this is something which we need to keep in mind when we think and when we talk about the abortion scenario in our country. The second highlight of the study was that over 12.7 million, that's 81% of all abortions in this country are medication abortions. You know, when medication abortion came in, people started saying that, oh, doctors will never prescribe medication abortion because that doctors want to do surgical abortion and so on. And there were a lot of activists who were very critical about doctors and said that doctors will never do medical abortion. They will continue to do surgical abortions because they can charge for it and so on and so forth. And I think, again, due credit to us. I mean, we have actually gone ahead and we have become, I think, after China, the world's largest medication abortion provider in the entire world. Couple this with the fact, remember I told you that a large majority of abortions occur outside facilities. Overwhelming overwhelmingly large number of abortions are medication abortion. And couple this with the fact of what WHO has said. I know that the WHO is under severe criticism these days because of its handling of the coronavirus pandemic. But in this instance, at least I believe that the WHO is right when they say that almost all abortion related deaths are preventable. When abortion is performed by qualified people using correct techniques in sanitary conditions, it is in fact one of the safest medical procedures. Little outrageous article I saw in a newspaper from America, which said that nowadays abortion may actually be safer than getting your tooth removed. I don't believe it. I think that is an exaggeration, but those are the kind of things which people are now talking about. And yet, a procedure which is deemed to be one of the safest medical procedure ever results in so many deaths every year. In India, 32,000 women apparently die from abortion every year. That means one woman every 3 hours. It's therefore very important that we understand how abortion can be provided in the context of the laws which surround abortion in our country. Unfortunately, I've seen a tendency for us not to read the actual act and just depend on so-called second-hand knowledge. And that is why most of the times when the authorities come to us and when they talk to us, we are a little unsure of what to do. Because if we are not confident about all the laws and all the acts which regulate us, then how can we answer the authorities properly? Therefore, I would urge all of you to please download a copy of the MTP Act. It's a very short act. And please read it at least once or twice because it's a very simple act. It's a very elegant act. And actually, it's a very empowering act. The MTP Act is one of the few acts in our legislature which actually empowers doctor to provide a service and protects us when we provide that service. Unfortunately, as I said, the tendency is not to read this act. And as Mark Twain said, it's something like a classic, something that everybody wants to have read, but nobody actually wants to read. What I'll do is I'll take you a little bit through the MTP Act. It doesn't replace reading the full act, but at least I hope it will serve as a primer and, for want of a better word, inspire you to please download the act and read it once. What is the need of the act? The Indian Penal Code, which was bequeathed to us by the British, had two sections which criminalized abortion. When the government realized that unsafe abortions had a very, very high morbidity and mortality, in order to prevent this morbidity and mortality, and as you can see in the underlined sentence, save the pregnant woman's life, they set up a Shantilal Shah committee in 1964. This committee gave its report and recommended a broadening and rationalization of the laws in 1966. The MTP bill was presented to the Rajya Sabha in 1969, referred to a joint select review, and finally passed as the MTP Act in 1971. You can see circled in red over there in part of the screen that FOXI was represented even at that time when this MTP Act was being drafted, and FOXI continues to have a strong presence on deliberations for the MTP Act. The reason I'm telling you all these dates is that whenever I give this talk, I'm told, oh, why can't they change the act? And, why can't they do this and that and the other? I'm talking about the government here. But you'll realize that changing the act is not as easy as it looks, and it's a very time-consuming process. I will tell you a little more about it when we talk about the 2020 amendments. So finally, we had Act number 34 of 1971, which was the MTP Act, which was then enforced nationwide. And now, of course, after the abrogation of Article 370, it's also applicable to the state of Jammu, Kashmir, and Ladakh. There is sometimes a little confusion on what is the Act, what are rules, and what are regulations. So the Act is an act of Parliament, which has gone through the whole process of Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha, Select Committee, and so on. The MTP rules are framed by the central government, but they must be ratified by each House of Parliament. So they are a step down from the act, but you can make rules only for things which are already there in the act. MTP regulations are framed by state governments and they relate to issues involving opinions, reporting, and maintaining secrecy. So typically, the regulations which are there from the central government are something like a framework, and every state has the authority to change those regulations. I must tell you, however, that there are hardly any states which have changed the regulations. In fact, I don't think there are any because they have all adopted the regulations which are proposed by the central government. The most relevant section for us in the MTP Act is Section 3. And Section 3 essentially tells you when pregnancies may be terminated by RMPs, or they describe the indications or the situations in which pregnancies may be terminated. In a sense, the MTP Act is, as I said, very simple. It tells you who can do an MTP, it tells you where the MTP can be done, and it tells you who can undergo the MTP. So Section 3 tells you when pregnancy may be terminated by RMPs. So first it tells you that if the pregnancy is less than 12 weeks, then the opinion of one medical practitioner is sufficient. If the pregnancy is between 12 to 20 weeks, the opinion of two RMPs or registered medical practitioners is required. So in a sense, you can do MTPs legally up to 20 weeks in India. Once you cross 20 weeks, you can't do MTPs as of now in our country. Remember that the amendments currently are with the parliament still. They have been passed in the Lok Sabha, but they still have to be passed in the Rajya Sabha, and then the government has to gazette them. It's my opinion, this will still take some time. I don't think it's going to happen very soon because along with the act always comes rules and regulations. So we haven't even seen a draft of the rules and regulation which will follow the amendments. But more about this a little later. So you can do an MTP up to 20 weeks, up to 12 weeks. The opinion of one doctor is enough. Between 12 and 20, you need the opinion of two doctors. When can you do an MTP? You can do it if there is a risk to life or grave injury to her physical or mental health, or there is a substantial risk for the child to have physical or mental abnormalities such that child would be seriously handicapped. Explanations within this section go on to explain these indications. For example, it says that if the patient has been raped or is alleging rape, the anguish is considered to be enough to constitute a grave injury to mental health. And when the pregnancy occurs by failure of any device or method used by any married woman, the anguish caused by such pregnancy may be constitute a grave injury to the mental health of the pregnant woman. Technically speaking, therefore, the indication that you should be writing is not failure of contraception. They did a study in between and they found that almost 96% of MTPs were done for failure of contraception. Technically speaking, you shouldn't be writing failure of contraception. Technically, you should be writing failure of contraception resulting in grave injury to mental health because this is presumed to cause a grave injury. Of course, there is another part where you have to take into account actual or reasonable foreseeable environment, and this gives some flexibility to the indications. As far as consent is concerned, always remember you have to take consent in Form C. No other form of very fancy consent of how many ever pages you want is a legal substitute for Form C. So Form C always has to be fulfilled. If the patient is above the age of 18 years, and is in sound mental health, then only her consent is required. You don't need the consent of an adult woman's sasu, husband, fafa, fufa, whoever it may be. Her own consent is quite adequate to perform a MTP. But if that patient is less than 18 years old, then you need the consent in writing of her guardian. This is, however, conflated now with the POCSO Act, which we will be talking about a little later. Where can you terminate a pregnancy? You have to terminate a pregnancy in a hospital which is recognized by the district level committee. However, this doesn't apply to medication abortion, which I'm going to talk about a little later. This is what the composition of the district level committee looks like. The requirements for MTP, previously when you applied for your center to be recognized for MTPs, you had to have all the facilities right up to 20 weeks abortion. In 2002, the government segregated these requirements, and they said that if you want to do only first trimester abortions, then you don't need all the requirements that you have for second trimester abortions. In fact, I mean, the requirements for first trimester abortion now are so less actually that, you know, it would really be quite difficult to do the abortion if you didn't have that much. A word about the legal situation of medical abortion. Medication abortions actually are not mentioned in the MTP Act. They come to us because of the rules which followed the 2002 amendment to the MTP Act. Therefore, up to 9 weeks, not 7 weeks, it's a misunderstanding that you can allow or you're allowed to use MIFI only up to 7 weeks. You are legally allowed to use it up to 9 weeks. It's not off label. And most importantly, you can do it from a place which is not registered for MTP. So for example, if you're working in say a polyclinic or you have your own clinic, but you don't have the OT, then all you have to do is display a certificate saying that I have access to this place in case there is a complication from the medication abortion. And you can provide a medication abortion quite legally and quite safely from that place. Remember that the MTP Act applies in all respects. The consent is vital. And of course, as per all the guidelines, ultrasound is not mandatory. We already know who can terminate pregnancies. The other section 2 and 3 of this were actually because at 1971, they did not have enough people who had a PG degree or diploma. So, and they had people already doing abortions. So they wanted to not lose their expertise. But nowadays it would be that you can do an MTP if you have a PG degree or diploma in ONG. That person is qualified to do MTPs right up to 20 weeks. But if there is an MBBS doctor, this abortions are restricted to doctors from the MBBS stream of medicine. If there is an MBBS doctor who's either got a house surgical experience of 6 months or an experience of 1 year in ONG or has assisted or performed 25 MTPs in a training institute, then they are allowed to do abortions up to 12 weeks of gestation. What documentation and record do you need? I think this is a little misunderstood, so allow me 2 minutes to talk about this. Ideally, the process should be that you have to keep an admission register. When the patient comes to you, you make an entry in the admission register with her name and contact details and assign her a code. Thereafter, that patient has to be referred to by that code in all subsequent documents. Sometimes I feel that it is a little silly because when you give a discharge card, you're going to give that discharge card to the patient. And technically on that discharge card, you have to write a code instead of that patient's name. This also creates a problem sometimes for Mediclaims because there are some patients who, particularly those in the IT industry, they would like to do a Mediclaim or they would like to make a claim from their company. And then how do you make sure that confidentiality is maintained and that she can get the claim, because they will not give you a claim on the basis of a discharge card with a code. Importantly, as I said earlier, the MTP Act is a protective act and an empowering act for us. Therefore, if you look at this section 8 of the MTP Act, if you follow the MTP Act correctly and perfectly, then not only can you not be punished, but you can't actually even be sued by the police or by a patient or the court. But for this protection, you have to follow the MTP Act in all its aspects. Of course, this is an example of how sometimes words, just one word can cause so many problems. I'd like you to read the first subsection over here, which says that in a sense, if it is immediately necessary to save the life of the pregnant woman, then you can perform an abortion even beyond 20 weeks. So the ability for us to provide abortions beyond 20 weeks already exists in the Act. The problem is it says immediately necessary. So just imagine if this word immediately were not there, it would be necessary to save the life. And then if you read this, along with the phrases which say immediate or foreseeable future, then you could actually provide abortions to patients beyond 20 weeks, even without amendments in the act. So it's like, I don't know how many of you are Harry Potter fans, but I'm a big fan of Harry Potter. And when Scrimgeour asks Hermione, "Are you planning to follow a career in law?" She says, "No, I'm not. I'm actually hoping to do some good in the world." And again, this is the attitude that we have towards laws, and sometimes actually with good reason, because there was this perfectly good MTP Act which was allowing us to provide abortion safely for our women, and then the government brought in this POCSO Act. And what this POCSO Act in essence does is it criminalizes all sexual activity below the age of 18. The government in today's day and age, or when this act was passed, it was not passed, it was passed quite some time back, 2012 and so on. But at that time, the government decided to adopt a patriarchal attitude towards adolescent sexuality and said that, we don't think that adolescents are mature enough to have sex. We think anybody who is not a major needs protection from the government, a very sort of a my bap kind of an attitude, from the people who made the policy at that time. And there were even voices at that time. For example, the National Commission for Protection of Child Rights stressed that, you need to recognize that there is sexual exploration amongst adolescents. And you cannot just criminalize all sexual behavior below the age of 18. But the government at that time failed to consider the nuances of age difference, child development, and therefore came out with this very, very stringent act. And the problem with this act is that it does not only criminalize sexual activity for the adolescents, it also has an aid and abetment clause. So, for example, if I come to know that this person has had sexual activity and I don't report it, I can be held responsible and I can be penalized under the act. That is causing so many problems with providing abortions to adolescents, because obviously if she's pregnant and she's come to you for an MTP, she's had sex. So the POCSO Act starts getting applied over there. And this is because of the stringent nature of the act. It's causing so many problems in providing abortions to adolescents. A lot of conflict and confusion. For example, look at these two government documents. On one side, you see the POCSO Act document. On the other side, you see the RKSK document. Now, this document in green actually talks about providing contraception to adolescents and adolescent-friendly clinics. So on the one hand, you have a government or you have a government policy saying all criminal activity below the age of 18 is criminal. And then they also come out with a document which talks about providing contraception to adolescents. I think this is something which really needs to be addressed quite urgently by the by the government. Of course, there is also the conflation with the PCPNDT Act, with the very sort of a grave misunderstanding that the large majority of second trimester abortions are sex selected. The truth is that they are not. There is good data to show that the number of abortions in second trimester which occur because of sex selection actually is at a fairly low level. However, because of these kind of perceptions, doctors simply refuse to perform second trimester abortions. For example, in this paper, as this doctor says, it does not make any difference in my practice if I don't provide an abortion, but it makes a great difference if I do an abortion and it turns out to be a female fetus. If a woman has even one daughter, I refuse to perform the abortion. And, we are in Foxy were very seized by this matter. We went to court. We said that it's not that we don't want regulation, but we would like this regulation to be streamlined. We'd like it to be doctor friendly, and please make it easy so that we can follow this regulation. Now, despite providing evidences like this, I don't know whether you can read this, but if you can read it, I'll urge you to read what is in the box. This is an RTI from the state of Rajasthan, and this person who filed the RTI informed the total number of pregnant women who underwent illegal sex determination detected on the basis of the F forms. And the government itself has said that it's zero. In fact, it went on to ask in different districts about the number of illegal sex determinations that were prevented with data obtained from F forms. And they didn't study 5-6 forms, they studied 46 lakh forms. And after studying 46 lakh forms, the government could not prevent even one illegal sex determination or a gender selected abortion. I think it's high time that the government realizes that this strategy of F form filling is not really working or doing anything to prevent gender selected abortions or even gender selection. And I must stress here that always remember that the crime in this instance is not the abortion. The crime is the selection of gender. People sometimes think, and there are a lot of policymakers who also think, that shutting down abortions is the easy way to address the problem of gender selected abortions, but it's not. Because by shutting down abortions, you are actually depriving women of services that they need. You need to focus attention on the selection of gender rather than the abortion. You know, we have always said and we have talked about how we need to extend the limit of gestation. And this is something which I have said, that the question of abortion shouldn't be an issue in the political arena. When a woman has to make this kind of decision, she should see her doctor, not her lawyer. And unfortunately, despite everything, and you know, we have even represented ourselves to the Prime Minister's office. You can see that's us standing in front of the Prime Minister's office. Finally, you know, the amendments to the act have come. They are not very comprehensive, but certainly they are better than what we had. Over the next 2 minutes, I'll just take you through what are the amendments which figure for the 2020 amendment. As you can see, and I cannot emphasize this enough, these amendments have only so far been passed in the Lok Sabha. They are not law yet. So whatever these amendments say will be applicable to our practice only when they pass through the Rajya Sabha and the government issues a gazette. As of now, we are regulated by all the things which I have already told you about. So what these amendments? They promulgate the establishment of medical board. That means they make it compulsory. The Supreme Court had already said that you need to have medical boards. They have now brought this into the act. And they have added this, saying that termination of pregnancy means a procedure by using medical or surgical methods. What was the need to add this? The need was that medical abortion was not actually within the act. Now medical abortion has been brought into the act. Now, these are the crucial kind of changes, and they are saying now where the length of pregnancy does not exceed 20 weeks, if such medical practitioner is, this means that now up to 20 weeks, you will not need the sign of two doctors. The sign of one doctor is enough. Whatever was applicable till 12 weeks is now applicable up to 20 weeks. The second line means that if there is an abortion to be done between 20 and 24 weeks, you will still need the sign of two doctors. But this is an important change. It's a significant change. And I think the government needs to be congratulated for this. They've also removed that to be seriously handicapped portion from the substantial risk that if the child were born. Again, this is important because previously you needed to prove that the child would be seriously handicapped. Now, just the detection of a physical or mental abnormality may suffice to provide the abortion. Another important change is that they have removed the word married from the failure of contraception clause, which means that now even single women will use the clause of failure of contraception. And of course, they have extended the mental injury clause right up to 24 weeks. But they had to do that because they have extended the time for abortion up to 20 weeks. Now, over here, again, this is how the medical board will be established, and they have talked a little bit about that, but there will be more detail about it in the rules which will follow. They have also added a punishment if you break confidentiality. And this applies to both. It applies to us as well as authorities. So if an authority comes to you and says, I want to see your register, and you say that give it to me in writing, if that authority gives it to you in writing, that authority is now subject to punishment for breaking confidentiality, which was not there earlier. They have, of course, the power to make rules. And again, as I said, the rules have to follow the act. Otherwise, there is no clarity on how the act will be implemented. This is just an op-ed I have written for the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. It will be published by the ministry when the act comes out. And just to inform you that the government of Maharashtra had asked a group of us to draft how the medical boards will function for abortion beyond 20 weeks. Now it will be applicable for abortions beyond 24 weeks, but this has already been written and it has been submitted to the government of Maharashtra. I've got only around 7 to 8 minutes left now, and I will try to talk whatever I can about the practice of abortions in this much time that I have left. So here are the preferred methods of abortion, as you all know. The key here really is that we shouldn't really be doing DNCs anymore. We should be replacing DNCs completely with vacuum aspiration. This vacuum aspiration, of course, can be done by the electric pump or by the manual vacuum aspiration. But currently, what is recommended by practically every guideline in the world is manual vacuum aspiration. Remember that the safer abortions are the abortions which are done early. And this is what adds time sensitiveness. You see, particularly during this time, there were a lot of questions raised about how the COVID pandemic will affect women who seek abortions. And there are so many things to talk about in that, but the two important things over there is to realize that abortions are time sensitive. They are time sensitive medically because the earlier you do an abortion, the safer it is. And secondly, because of the gestational limits which are placed on women because of the MTP Act. So it's not as if we don't have to continue providing abortions. We still continue to provide abortions even during the COVID pandemic time. A word about the MVA syringe. You know that MR was there. It was considered to be effective, but then it fell out of favor till the new MVA syringe came. One of the major differences between the old syringe and the new syringe was actually this valve. I don't know whether you can see the pointer, but this valve in the old MR syringe used to be made of India rubber. And what used to happen in hot countries was that this rubber used to become brittle, it used to give way, and therefore the suction that was made with the MVA syringe was inadequate. And because it was inadequate, the number of incomplete abortions was high. But now that it has been replaced by a solid plastic or a silastic kind of a valve, we know that the MVA currently remains the best method of providing a surgical abortion. I'm sure all of you do MVAs, but one thing I'd like to specify here is that remember, the MVA acts by vacuum. You don't need to go and touch the fundus every time to know or to complete the abortion. You're supposed to keep the MVA cannula just a little bit below the fundus and then expect all the products of conception to come into the MVA syringe and then turn the syringe around to make sure that the entire uterine cavity is evacuated very well. Of course, when we started talking about MVA back in 2001, 2002, one of the doubts that people always had was that, you have that mighty big electric vacuum making sound. Now, how can this tiny little syringe, which is, so quiet, produce the same vacuum? Well, the truth is that till the syringe is 80% full, the MVA actually produces a better suction than the electric pump. But once the syringe is 80% full, the vacuum in the syringe drops. Is that a bad thing? No, this is the biggest safety feature of the MVA syringe. Because per chance, if you happen to aspirate, with an electric vacuum, potentially you could suck out the entire abdominal viscera. But that cannot happen with an MVA because the capacity of the MVA syringe is limited. We therefore, need to look at data and you need to realize that DNC should actually be abandoned completely. We should not be doing DNCs anymore. And we have worked on this. This is a study that we had done in West Bengal along with IPAS, and somehow it seemed that the provision of DNC was much higher than MVA. We did a workshop for people from 7 hand-picked sites where the problem was acute. And after the workshop, we found that DNC use at that time had come down by 15 percentile points. So it's not that doctors don't want to evolve. It's not that we don't want to adapt. Sometimes we, just need a gentle nudge or a push in the right direction. We'll talk a little bit about medication abortion now, and you can look at the journey of how medication abortion related guidelines have evolved and, for want of a better word, matured over a period of time. As we've already said, MA drugs can, as of now, be prescribed only by a trained provider. As I've already told you, you can prescribe them from outdoor clinics with established linkages. And, you can use MA right up to 9 weeks of gestation. If you look at MA carefully, you'll find that, as I said earlier, it's not actually in the Act. The rules or the Act, legally, therefore, there is no dose that is specified. Whatever doses are available in guidelines and government guidelines and so on. The routes of administration are not specified. But of course, for documentation, you need to fill forms C1, 3, and 2. So what is the recommended dose for MA in the first trimester? MIFI 200, Meso 400, either sublingual, buccal, vaginal, oral, after 24 to 48 hours, and maybe even for 60 for the 9 weeks. But sometimes we feel MA is so simple, you just have to give the pills. But remember that even medication abortion is governed by a whole lot of acts and rules. So these are the differences between the WHO guidelines and the Government of India CAG guidelines. Of course, we need to follow the Government of India CAG guidelines as much as possible. This is just some work we had done. This was a MapNet, or a medication abortion providers network. I will finish this presentation by talking a little bit about second trimester abortion. And the reason I'd like to talk about second trimester abortion is because it has a disproportionately high morbidity and mortality. So although the number of second trimester abortions is low, the morbidity and mortality which results from second trimester abortions is disproportionately high. And this is, as I've already said, because of the bogey of gender selection. But remember, again, as I've told you, the large majority of women don't come for a second trimester abortion for sex determination. They come to you for various reasons. And I have just quoted this study from the UK to show that these reasons are universal. It is not as if our women do it deliberately. Women all over the world pretty much behave the same way when it comes to second trimester abortion, which reiterates the point that we still need abortion as early as possible and as late as necessary. This is going to be my last slide, where I will talk a little bit about how to provide second trimester abortion. And one of the major conflations here is the fact that as of now, on-label use for mifepristone and misoprostol, as per the Drug Controller of India, is supposed to be only up to 9 weeks. But remember that there is excellent evidence to show that Mifi-Meso is safe in India. And in fact, 3 government guidelines talk about the use of Mifi-Meso in the second trimester. As the safest method of providing abortion. I'm going to end over here with this slide, which talks a little bit about how to provide Mifi-Meso in the second trimester. But I'll tell you how we do it. We give 200 milligrams of oral mifepristone. We found that adding mifepristone for second trimester abortions makes a lot of difference in induction abortion interval. We then call the patient after 48 hours, admit her in the night, and we put 400 micrograms of misoprostol vaginally. We use the vaginal route, and we find that within a short period of time, 6 to 8 hours, the patients usually go into labor and abort. You can, of course, repeat doses every 3 to 6 hours, up to 5 doses. But we've seen typically that within 2 or 3 doses, that patient has an abortion. And I'm very happy to say that, these are guidelines written by, drafted by me for FOXI in 2004. And really speaking, medication abortion has been so stable that nothing much has changed. I'm going to stop this presentation now because I'm actually overshot the time by 2 minutes, and I'll be more than happy to take questions now.
Yes, thank you very much, sir. Already the chat box has started overflowing with questions. Should we start the question answers right away?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, so just one moment. Yeah, the first question is, is USG necessary for medical termination?
Okay, the answer is very short, and the answer is no. There is no guideline in the world which says that you have to do an ultrasound before providing an abortion, either medical or surgical. But no guideline also says that you should not do an ultrasound. The reason why guidelines talk about ultrasound that way is that provision of ultrasound should not become a barrier in the provision of abortion. So in places where ultrasound is not available, you can continue to provide abortion even if there is no ultrasound available. But if you have access to ultrasound and you would like to use it to provide the abortion, nothing stops you from doing it.
Right. But it is better for our own safety, so if we document, if it is available.
Well, again, I will hesitate to say that because as an office bearer of Foxy, I would not like to say that as a policy. But as I said, if you have access to it, you should use it. For example, if you ask me what I do an ultrasound. I don't hesitate to do an ultrasound, either to determine the gestational age or even to look at completion of the abortion. So I do it. But if somebody has not used ultrasound, I will not say that that is the wrong.
So in the same setting, sir, I would ask you, what about the follow-up ultrasound after 15 days in case of medical termination to confirm completion of abortion? Many of places people are still not doing it.
Okay. So if there's a history of the patient having past products of conception and not having excessive bleeding, and then after 15 days, when she comes, you do a PV and you find that the uterus has shrunk in size. There is excellent evidence from all over the world to show that adding an ultrasound at that point makes no difference at all. Means history and PV are the same as doing an ultrasound. So again, if you would like to do it, nothing stops you from doing it, but it certainly is not mandatory.
Right. That was great. Do we need to see the patient in person before giving medical method of MTP in this corona scenario?
That's an excellent question. I'm happy for that question actually, because it speaks to the use of self-use. For example, patients are going to chemists, as I told you. The large majority of medication abortions are occurring outside the clinic. And frankly speaking, if those were harmful for the patients, then shouldn't our mortality and morbidity from abortions have risen very, very considerably? If 80% of patients of medication abortion are accessing medication abortion on their own, and if that were harmful, the morbidity and mortality from abortion should have shot through the roof. But the fact of the matter is, and again, excellent evidence to show from SRS surveys, is that, and I really like this statistic a lot, so bear with me for a minute while I tell you this.
Sir.
The government does these sample registration surveys. And these sample registration surveys tell you about the contribution of unsafe abortion in percentages to maternal mortality. So in the SRS survey, which was done in 1999, the contribution of unsafe abortion to maternal mortality was 18%, 18%. When they did the next survey in 2004 to 2005, they found that the contribution of unsafe abortion to maternal mortality had dropped by a massive 10 percentage points. That means from 18% contribution to mortality, it had come down to an 8% contribution to maternal mortality. What changed? Did the number of providers increase? Did the government suddenly get better at providing abortions? Did the number of centers providing abortions increase? No. What happened was that in 2002, medication abortion legalized, and we started getting medication abortion for our patients freely. And that really made this whole, shrink in the contribution of unsafe abortion to maternal mortality. So just think about it from a little open kind of a mind, a little broader perspective. As I said, from the perspective of that 12-year-old girl in the village, small village who had absolutely no access to health services. And I just like to, make a point here that when we talk about too much regulation, and every time I say this, I'm told that isn't medication abortion harmful? We see patients who come to us with incomplete abortion. We see patients who come to us with bleeding when they've taken the pills on their own, and so on and so forth. But look at the alternative which this patient has. If she doesn't take Mifimizo, she's going to go to a DAI or she's going to go to an unsafe provider, and have a stick put into her uterus. Now you tell me what is safer. Is taking mifimizo more unsafe, or is it more unsafe for her to go to a dye and getting a stick put into her uterus? I say this again, a lot of seniors sometimes disagree with me, and I tell them, like you used to have eclampsia wards. There used to be wards of unsafe abortion with patients, all the beds used to be full of patients who had complications of unsafe abortions. When I was a resident, or now, those wards have disappeared.
Yes.
So unsafe abortion exists. Yes, there is no question about that. The question is the degree of safety which MIFI and MIZO imparts and contributes to a reduction in morbidity and mortality cannot be disregarded. So, I hope that answers the question.
Yes, yes, sir. So please guide on whether to include spontaneous abortions, incomplete abortions, etc., where there is no viable embryo and we are doing evacuation. This should not be included in the MTP register. What should we do?
Absolutely not. What is the question? I mean, those are not abortions at all. Those are just MVAs. You see, although terminology is the same, remember that in India, an abortion which the patient wants is an abortion, etc., are abortions. So absolutely don't put them in their MTP register. There is absolutely no need. And in fact, to my mind, it's illegal to say that you're doing an MTP when there is a missed abortion. It simply does not fall into the definition, because the difference between an MTP and an abortion is whether that pregnancy is wanted or not. In a missed abortion, that pregnancy was wanted, but unfortunately she miscarried. So obviously you absolutely do not put, and if any authority tells you that your numbers of MTPs are low or high because you're not including missed abortion, please refer them to us. We'll be more than happy to give that answer. We have given it to several authorities, and we will be more than happy to address this issue.
So then maybe our society will be the next one to give you, because in Nagpur we've been asked to include DNEs in MTP registers and in the monthly format that we submit.
No, you cannot. Legally, you cannot. Okay, so there is no question. Please write to us. We'll give you a proper legal opinion around this. And if you would like us to come and meet your authorities, we'll do that also. More than happy to do it. Of course, the flights have to resume, but.
Yes, sir. Right. Someone has just suggested, I think ultrasound should be made mandatory to save women as incidence of early pregnancy is increasing. That's it. For decreasing second trimester abortions, can we set punishment to patients if abortus comes out to be a healthy female? I don't know why.
Oh my God, I think that is a very, no, I mean, the short answer is you can't do that. It's actually a little shocking to me, because you would then be penalizing women who need second trimester abortion, have actually bothered to come to a qualified provider, and then, are being penalized simply because they are carrying a woman. No, I think, as I told you earlier also, remember that the crime is not the abortion. The crime is the selection of gender, and that is where our attention should be. Always, whenever we talk to authorities, whenever we do advocacy, our attention has to be that the crime is not the sex-selected abortion, rather it is this thing. I've already said that the large majority of second trimester abortions, in fact, are not gender-selected. And if you're going to penalize these women, you're going to penalize a whole lot of women quite unnecessarily.
Absolutely. What are the documentation which is required for a medical termination?
The same as it would be for a surgical termination. You need to fill the opinion form. You need to fill Form C. You need to enter them in the register. And then at the end of the month, you need to, give that report. So there is no difference in documentation, whether you're doing a medical abortion or a surgical abortion. Only the method of providing the abortion changes. Documentation is absolutely the same.
So do we need to take a separate consent for medical termination then?
No, if you're taking Form C, then that's quite enough. That's either for medical or for surgical. Yes.
Okay. Can we do second trimester abortion on a woman who comes with a failure of contraception without any fear of litigation?
Yes, of course. I mean, if she's less than 20 weeks, she's adult of sound mind, most certainly you can. Remember that the MTP Act actually protects you in this circumstance. So if you are qualified, if you are doing it in a registered place, and you are giving an adequate indication and your paperwork is complete, not only can you not be punished, you are actually not even supposed to have a case registered against you. And there is more than adequate legal precedent for that. As I already said, the MTP Act is one of the few acts in our country which is protective for us. But for it to be protective, you have to follow the act completely.
Okay, there's a question from Dr. Anjali Bedekar from Nagpur. Recently, she had a patient 24 weeks with congenital kyphoscoliosis with bilateral club foot. Patient wanted to terminate the pregnancy. How to go about this?
How many weeks of pregnancy
24. 24.
Well, at 24 weeks, I'm afraid you can't do an MTP. However, there is now a procedure in place. Remember, the amendments have not been passed yet. So in Maharashtra, the procedure is that affidavit has to be filed in High Court. As per the guidance which I just showed you, which I had helped to draft, within 7 days, you have to receive permission on whether that MTP can be done or not after an opinion from the medical board. So you cannot do this MTP on your own. You have to go to High Court, and you can't go to a lower court because that judgment very clearly says that for abortions beyond 20 weeks, as of now, you have to go to the High Court. But things are much better than what they used to be. These SOPs have come out, and if you go to the High Court, things should actually be quite expedient. But you cannot do this abortion on your own.
Right.
You have to go.
We have in Nagpur a board set up in Government Medical College. So
right.
Doctors from Nagpur can know Dr. Ashish Jararia is in charge of that. You can always contact him for help.
Yeah.
Doctor, what about medication for abortion for a patient who has had cesarean 6 months back? Any specific care or precaution?
No, you provide it exactly the same way as you would for any other patient. The incidence of uterine rupture for these patients is no higher than it would be for anybody else. So there is no difference in the way you provide abortion. It's
right. Dr. Kalpana Gulwade from Chandrapur wants to know, she is asking you to flash the guideline differences again. There was a slide on guideline differences. She wants to see that slide again.
Maybe okay. Well, I don't want to waste everyone's time. I can share the entire presentation with you.
Yes, we have recorded this session.
You can circulate
we have recorded this session, so we'll be uploading.
Absolutely no problem.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Why there is still selling of abortion pills by chemists to patients illegally and without prescription? What can we do about it?
Well, I think I already talked a little bit about it, about the availability of medication abortion and its relation with maternal mortality and morbidity. And sometimes when you ask government to make things more strict, you have to keep in mind the fact that you might be breaking off access for patients. As I said, it's a contextual thing. If we had an excellent kind of health facilities and a lot of places where abortion is provided, it would be a different scenario. But in this case, I think it's a different scenario. Mind you, the law already exists. The law already says that these pills are to be provided only by prescription from an RMP. However, regulation as a strategy has traditionally not worked very well in India. But all we can do is ask for people to follow the law, keeping in mind the fact that sometimes asking for too stringent regulation can also create a problem.
That's right. Can I request Dr. Gaurav to please stop sharing his screen? He has, by mistake, started sharing his screen. Dr. Gayatri Rathod wants to know, if an unmarried adolescent girl comes to us for abortion, is it necessary to inform the maybe because she's a major or minor? She's not.
Hello.
Please mute. Please, everyone, mute your audio, please.
Dr. Dipali, kindly stop sharing the screen. Dr. Dipali Gaurav.
And please mute your audio. It's disturbing the session. If an unmarried adolescent girl comes to us for an abortion, is it necessary to inform the police? I think she means a minor adolescent. I'm not sure.
If it's a minor adolescent, then under the current POCSO Act, yes, you have to inform. I'm afraid there are no two ways about it. But if she is more than 18 years old and she's unmarried, you can provide the abortion, provided she's of sound mental health.
Someone wants to know, if congenital anomaly is detected beyond 24 weeks, then why is it not allowed in the MTP Act, the new MTP Act, the amendment?
Okay, it's not that it's not allowed, it's actually allowed. you have to go to the medical board to get permission beyond 24 weeks. I'm not sure, but I think that will follow in the rules a little later. And that is why the establishment of medical boards has been taken into the amendments, so that it becomes compulsory for all districts to have at least one medical board. What will happen when the amendments come in all likelihood is that you will not need to go to High Court. So that step will be avoided. You will be able to go to the medical board directly.
Right.
Yeah. But so that it's built into it, but beyond 24 weeks, you will still need medical board permission. We were advocating that
That's
you not.
fair also,
yeah. I'm not sure it's fair. I would have preferred it if they left it to the doctor to decide. Yeah, sure. I mean, if it's in congenital abnormality,
only in case of
congenital abnormality. I mean, if it's an abnormality, yeah, exactly. I mean, if it's a congenital abnormality, then I think it's very fair that the doctor and the patient together decide and, do the needs.
How safe and effective is intracervical catheterization?
It's very safe. I'm not sure how effective it is. If you look at the data, and this is old data actually, starting from 1970s onwards, when I had in 2004, when I had drafted the guidelines for FOXI, we had talked about intracervical catheter. We have a mention in that because we used to use a lot of Encredil at that time. So I believe that it's extremely safe. But now when mifepristone and misoprostol are there and they are so safe and effective, I really see no earthly reason why people would want to use anything else. I mean, beyond any doubt whatsoever, they are really the most effective way of providing abortions at any point in time in the pregnancy, really.
Right. And here I would like to recognize the presence of Dr. Gitendra. He has joined us, sir. He has joined you also. Sir. Thank you. Welcome, sir. There is one question I'm not able to understand what it means. What if two signatures are taken late after legal second trimester abortion?
Well, no, you're not. Legally, you're supposed to take the sign and then provide the abortion, because these signatures are supposed to be an opinion that the patient needs the abortion. So these two signatures are supposed to be taken before the abortion, ideally. Yes.
Right. This is a question from Dr. Yamini Gadkari. Do we have to maintain secret envelope with Form 1 and C for medical abortions done in OPD without an IPD?
You do. As I said, the documentation required for medication and surgical abortion is absolutely the same. You may either maintain a secret envelope or you may maintain a register under lock and key. It doesn't matter. You don't have to have an envelope, or you can put the register in the envelope. There is no clarity on that, but it has to be maintained in secrecy.
Right. If we are dispensing medical abortion kits from the clinic, is it necessary to maintain stock register of the same?
Yes. As per the drug controller rules, medication abortion is a restricted medicine and you need to maintain the register. In fact, even if you are not keeping a stock and you're prescribing and the indent is on the hospital's name, you will still have to maintain the register for that. But it's a simple register. It's not very difficult. For example, we maintain the register, but also what we do is that the blister pack in which it comes, we clip it to the patient's paper for whenever it is used. So just by chance something happens to the register, we have a record of which medication abortion blister pack was used for which patient.
It is a very
it's
good
not required, mind you. This is overkill actually. It's not required, but we do it.
Right. How are we ideally supposed to send the records of medical abortion done in our OPD where we don't have an IPD setup?
It's exactly the same way. Exactly the same way. Like you would report a surgical abortion, you need to report the medical abortion. There are two ways of doing this. One is that you can report it through the clinic with which you are affiliated. So as I said, if you are providing medication abortion from OPD where you don't have surgical facilities, you need to display a certificate saying that I am attached to this place where I will take the patient if there is a complication. So you can report it through that clinic or you can report it on your own.
So that doctor can herself go and operate on that patient in the clinic that she has displayed the address?
Yes.
So she doesn't have to get registered separately in that clinic?
No. See, you must understand that the registration from the authorities is only for the place. By virtue of being PG degree or diploma holders, we are automatically qualified. It's not like the PNDT Act where the doctor needs to be registered. So the registration for place and the registration for doctor is separate. By virtue of being postgraduate degree holders, we automatically abortion providers. Okay, so for example, I am practicing in an OPD in Nagpur Vaidehi, and you have a hospital, and you give me a certificate saying that in case Jaideep, who's providing medical abortion from the OPD, has a problem, he can come to my hospital and operate on that patient. That is perfectly fine. So if there is a problem, an incomplete abortion or something, I can take the patient to your hospital and I can, complete the abortion over there.
Yeah, but sir, like my hospital, I have an MTP registration certificate which mentions
Yeah.
the name of doctors, name of anesthetists. So is it compulsory for us to
Again,
only?
that is no, it's not. Actually, again, in Bombay also it's there. For example, when we apply for our MTP certification, we are asked to write the name of the doctor and the anesthetist. We are
Yes.
actually asked to write a blood bank also, which is close by. And again, these are all things which are added by local authorities, but it's not strictly required.
Not compulsory. What is the role of Saviprim gel in second trimester abortion? What's your opinion?
And now with Mifi Mizo, no role at all. I don't use it. I have not used Prime gel for second trimester abortion since 10 or 12 years or something. I think Mifi and Mizo are so good that
excellent.
you
Yes.
don't have to really bother about it.
Really. Mode of abortion in previous two sections and second trimester abortion for an anomalous baby. Or how should we conduct these abortions?
The same way that you would conduct any other abortion. I mean, just think about it. The lower segment of the uterus, which is what gives away in previous cesareans, is actually not developed till 32 weeks of pregnancy. Okay, so it's only at around 32 weeks that the lower segment starts developing, and then it starts thinning a little and so on and so forth. Therefore, anything less than 32 weeks, or even let's say 24 weeks to be on the safer side, you provide the medication abortion exactly the same way as you would up to 20 weeks. No difference at all. Only once you cross 32 weeks is when you start tapering the doses of misoprostol. Mifepristone, give the same dose, but you can taper the dose of misoprostol to account for the larger volume of the uterus.
So another important question from Dr. Varsha Dhawale. Which gestational age is to be calculated, LMP or ultrasound? Because this is important for patients who are, she is saying this is important for patients who are at crossroads at around 20 weeks.
Okay. So the answer to this off the record, you're recording this, but this is off the record, is whatever suits you and the patient the most. So if she is like, 20 weeks by dates, but her ultrasound is showing 19 weeks, say 19 weeks. Okay. And if it's vice versa, then do it the other way. Okay. Because there is no hard and fast rule about this. It says 20 weeks, but it doesn't say by ultrasound or by this. So you need to take advantage. As we say, we need to provide services to the full extent of the law. And when you want to provide services to the full extent of the law, you have to learn how to take advantage of the law when you need to.
Right. So, but how do we document then? Should we write on the paper that patient is 19 weeks, 4 days by ultrasound and LMP? And what do we do about the LMP?
As I said, write whatever suits you.
Oh, okay.
You can say, for example, you can say if she is 19 weeks by ultrasound and 20 weeks by dates, then you can say that she's 20 weeks by LMP, but her periods were not regular.
Right.
Okay,
Cool.
and nobody has periods like clockwork. Okay, nobody gets periods every 28 days all the time.
Right.
Okay, and so as I said, you need to take advantage of the law to benefit the patient as much as possible.
This solves a lot of problems for us, right? Primary 24 weeks unmarried comes to a private clinic for termination. Can we do it only on the patient's consent, or should we take permission from the court? 24 weeks we have to, right?
24 weeks, you have to take permission. There is no question about it. It's not a question of married or unmarried, but as of now, given that the amendments have not been passed, the legal limit of abortion is still 20 weeks.
Yeah. Is there any format or form to maintain patient's privacy? I didn't understand this question. Is there any form?
Yeah, it's built into it. As I said, you need to refer to the patient by code once she's entered into the register. So that register is actually your form.
Right. In today's time, when the follow-up visit, like in COVID time, to follow-up visit after 15 days may not be always possible. Is there a requirement to ensure the follow-up before administering the medical termination drugs?
Okay, over here we have to be a little pragmatic and we have to be a little realistic, because one understands that because of the lockdown and so on, follow-up visits may not always be possible. and you sometimes need to do the follow-up visit on the phone. Remember, as I've already said, that how to provide medical abortion is not there in the act, it's not there in the rules, it's not there in the regulations. There are only guidelines for it. And guidelines are supposed to be adapted to be used for the best advantage for the doctor and the patient. Okay, so over here, if you have a patient, say after 15 days, she calls you up and says, yes, I passed clots, I passed a lump of tissue which looked like an abortus, and I'm fine now. I don't have bleeding, I don't have spotting, I don't have foul smelling discharge, I don't have fever. Then quite reasonably, that is a patient whom you can say that please come if there is a problem. Otherwise, come when you can. You don't have to be strict about the 15-day follow-up for such patients.
Right. 3 doses of meso, 3 hourly. If exceeds, then it might cause uterine rupture in 16 to 17 weeks. What is
I'm
your
sorry,
opinion?
I didn't get that.
She said 3 doses of meso, 3 hourly. If
Yeah.
it exceeds, then it might cause uterine rupture in 16 to 17 weeks. What is your opinion, sir?
Well, let me not get into this in terms, in very specific terms, but I will say this, that most of the time, the reason for having a complication, particularly in the second trimester, is over enthusiasm. You know, typically you're given MIFI, now patient has waited 48 hours, she comes into the hospital, you know, in the night you put meso, she's not got any pains. Relatives start saying, डॉक्टर काय होतंय, कधी होणार, कधी संपणार, आम्हाला घरी जायचंय, माझं लहान मूल आहे, हे ते सगळं ते चालू होतं. So I think it's very important that you stick to protocol. I don't think giving meso every 3 hours for 3 doses is going to cause a rupture. It depends on how much meso you're using after all. So the way we do it is we put 400 micrograms of misoprostol initially. And after that, if the patient doesn't go into labor, then we wait for at least 8 hours after the initial dose. We have found that over 95% of patients simply go into labor with that, and that is all the meso that you require, provided you've used MIFI before. It's very important to use mifepristone. If she doesn't, then what we do is we add 200 micrograms of misoprostol after around 8 hours, and we give 200 micrograms every 4 hours. And we give a maximum of 3 doses. But again, honestly, I have never ever needed more than 2 extra doses beyond that 400 micrograms. So this is all. If per chance it happens that there is this occasional patient, after 3 doses also she has not responded, then we stop. We don't give any more misoprostol. We wait for the next day. And then we give the same dose of misoprostol again. That is our protocol. But as I said, it has never happened so far that we've had to wait overnight and then reinsert misoprostol.
Right. If MTP center is recognized up to 20 weeks, then can 24 weeks genuine MTP also be performed in the same registration?
Not as of now. Not as of now. When the amendments come in, the regulations will say that if you can do up to 20 weeks, you can do up to 24. But as of now, no. I think this is very important for everyone to realize that the amendment has only been passed in the Lok Sabha. It is not law as of now. It will be law when it gets passed in the Rajya Sabha, when rules and regulations for the amendment are made. And over here, remember, the rules and regulations are actually going to be as important as the act, because they are going to tell us how to provide abortions beyond 20 weeks. Therefore, you know, we are really looking forward to the rules and regulations and the draft to understand what the government is actually thinking about how we should provide these abortions. And when it comes out, that is when it becomes law. So it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take a little bit of a while because it will be unsafe to provide abortions beyond 20 weeks if the rules and regulations are not come.
Right. Dr. Gitendra sir has posted a nice comment on documentation. He has mentioned Form A, B, C and Form 1, 2, 3. Form A for application of registration. Form B is for the certificate of registration. Form C is consent. Form 1 is opinion form. Form 2 is monthly reporting. And Form 3 is admission register. That is the 14-column register. That's for everyone. So thank you for that. Should blighted ovum be entered as MTP? If yes, which? So you have already cleared that. So it's an income. Can we prescribe medical management in less than 9 weeks with previous 2 cesareans? You have said yes, we can. if I have to abort a live fetus after the patient has taken medicine, is it MTP?
I'm sorry, come again. Very broke
If
up a little.
if I have to abort a live fetus after the patient has taken medicine, is it an MTP? I don't get this question.
Yes, it still is an MTP.
It's an MTP.
Yeah, it's because it's live and it's an unwanted pregnancy.
Right.
So it's still an MTP.
Yeah. Can we give MTP pills for missed abortion and up to how many weeks?
Oh, no limit. Second trimester, 20 weeks, absolutely no problem. In fact, for missed abortion, you can use mifepristone and misoprostol legally even beyond 20 weeks. So
Yes.
it would not be a missed abortion. It would be an IUFD at that time, but you can use it at that time.
And medical pills work fantastic in these patients, right? So when
Absolutely.
the baby is there, yeah. Before 20 weeks or 24 weeks termination, what will be called after 24 weeks? Will it be an abortion or a termination?
Okay, that's an excellent question. It
Yes.
will still be called an MTP. The question then arises as to whether you need to do a feticide before intrauterine feticide with KCL before doing the abortion. And this is a very important question. So, for example, in the UK, later abortions you are supposed to do a feticide compulsorily so that the child is not born alive. Okay, so when we wrote the guidance for the SOPs for guidance for the medical boards, we have included that in the Maharashtra government guidelines. And we have said very clearly that any abortion which is beyond 24 weeks, you should do a feticide and then do the abortion. So I don't know technically what it will be called. It's my view that it should still be called an MTP. I don't think it should be called a delivery or a confinement or a premature birth or anything because the connotations of that are quite different. So it will be called an MTP, but the big question there is whether to do a feticide or not to ensure that the fetus is not born alive.
Right. What is the dose for medical abortion of meso, whether 400 or 800 micrograms?
400, I would always prefer 400, right up to 24 weeks of gestation. Once I cross 24 weeks, between 24 and 30 weeks. Now again, up to 24 weeks, there's good evidence for 400. Beyond 24 weeks, the evidence starts shrinking a little bit. So the number of studies which are available are not very many. But the protocol that we follow is that from 24 to 32 weeks, we use around 100 micrograms of misoprostol instead of the 200 which we use, in repeated doses. And once we go beyond that, we use 50 micrograms. I mean, of course, in that instance, it's not for labor. We don't use misoprostol at all for labor induction or augmentation. This is in patients of IUFD.
Right. So since you said missed abortion need not be included in the MTP register, so
Yeah.
should we keep a separate register for such patients?
Absolutely not. There is no legal requirement for doing so.
Oh, okay. But in
fact, it will just confuse the issue. So don't start doing it, because once you start doing it, it's very difficult to stop.
Right. Dr. Anuradha has mentioned in one of the meetings, we were told to inform if she has taken medicine for abortion, we were told to inform the police. I don't know why.
Well, that would only be applicable if she's less
Only
than 18 years old. More than 18, no, absolutely no.
Do we need to take consent of a relative or a partner of an unmarried 22-year-old girl for second trimester abortion?
No, you don't. Legally, the consent of the woman alone is enough. Provided she's more than 18 years old and of sound mind. Form C, you don't need anything more. But remember that sometimes people do take or insist that the husband sign or the relative sign should be there, thinking that socially it will be more helpful, particularly for second trimester, because one is a little worried about complications.
Right.
But legally speaking, you don't need up to 20 weeks anybody else's consent except an adult woman of sound mind.
Right. So this answers even this question when she asks for an unmarried major girl, do we need to inform police or parents? So
No. For a major girl, absolutely not.
Not required.
But don't use failure of contraception if she is unmarried.
Right.
Under the current act, what you're supposed to use is grievous injury or grievous mental injury.
Okay. Should we enter MTP with TL in our IPD register with code or with the name of patients? Because you have to enter the code, not the name in MTP.
So over here, the law surrounding MTP takes precedence because TL, there is no confidentiality clause or there is no law actually about TL. There are, but they are a little not like the MTP Act. So yes, you need to maintain confidentiality because you're doing the MTP, not because you're doing the TL.
Okay. After failed termination with medical abortion, if the patient
Yeah.
decides to continue the pregnancy, what are the chances of congenital anomalies? Do we have any data?
It's not, no, there is no data about this. For example, if she's taken only Mifi, I had this patient once who took mifepristone and then came back 2 days later for the meso and said that I don't want to take the meso now. I have changed my mind. I want to continue the pregnancy. And so I had to tell her that although there is no good data in terms of percentages of how many percentage of women develop anomalies, there is data to suggest that administration of MIFI and meso do cause congenital abnormalities. So if there is a failure after taking MIFI and meso, we don't recommend that they continue the pregnancy. We recommend that they go ahead and get that pregnancy evacuated and complete the MT.
Right. These are very basic. Where to send Form 1 and Form C? Dr. Pragya wants to know. Where to send?
Appropriate authority. You have to send it to the appropriate authority. For example, in my hospital, we send it to our local ward office. So I presume you'll have to do the same.
So, but Form C and Form 1 is consent and the opinion. No? Do we have to send that?
No, you don't have to send that. You only have to send the MTP report.
She asked about Form C and Form 1.
No, you don't have to. You only have to send the report in the stipulated form. That's all.
Okay. And should we need to, okay, so we don't have to send. Should we inform police before attempting an MTP in a minor girl? Yes.
Oh, of course, there's no question. Otherwise, you'll be liable to be prosecuted under the POXO Act, not under the MTP Act so much as the POXO Act. The POXO Act is the act which is worrisome. The MTP Act, as I said, is actually a benign and empowering act. But the POXO Act has really come in and caused so many problems for providing abortion to adolescents, which is ironic because, I mean, you know, the adolescent group of girls is actually the one who need this service the most. And unfortunately, they are being deprived the most because of this act. So the act which is supposed to protect them is actually, in a way, you know, causing problems for them.
Right. Should we need, do we need to admit the patient of medical termination at the time of giving meso?
If you're talking about first trimester abortion, then no, you don't need to. But for second trimester abortion, yes, you should. There are guidelines which say that patient should be in hospital till she delivers. She aborts, rather, sorry.
Okay. Diagnosed case of 19 weeks is single kidney wants an abortion. What should we do? Dr. Meena Agrawal
should
from
do it.
Futsal.
It's entirely the patient's choice. If she is less than 20 weeks, then you are certainly well within your rights, and so is the patient actually for demanding an abortion. You should just go ahead and do the abortion. And you know, this would be an example of a time-sensitive problem where, you know, even the pandemic should not stop you from providing that abortion, because once she goes beyond 20 weeks, then you will have left with no choice but to go to the court and so on and so forth.
Right. Sir, it's already 6 o'clock and I have 105 still messages pending. Should we go on? Okay. Is it okay for you?
I don't mind if you do.
So we already still have 313 participants logged in for your question and answer. So should I continue?
I don't mind. I mean, it's up to you.
Yeah, we don't mind, sir, because we are taking a lot of your time.
No, I'm fine.
Right. 26 weeks pregnancy with severe preeclampsia with live fetus needs to be delivered. What do we do with respect to the MTP Act?
Oh, this is not an MTP. You're delivering this patient for an obstetric indication. You're not doing an MTP for this patient. Remember, the element of being wanted is over here. So this is not an MTP at all. You are doing an obstetric delivery for this patient. So no entry in registered, no Form C, nothing. Because once this fetus is born, you may actually transfer this fetus to the NICU also. So this is quite clearly not an MTP. You know, maybe, you know, there is a little confusion about this issue now, but hopefully with the amendments, it will get clear. But this is very clearly an obstetric indication. It is not an MTP. So no entry into the register, no Form C, nothing.
Right. Can we write MTP medication in an outpatient sheet? I mean, on a prescription, can you prescribe them?
You're supposed to. You're supposed to.
Okay. Dr. Manisha Podduke Ghate from Chandrapur wants to know if the patient, after giving MTP pills, comes with an ultrasound report of incomplete abortion, should we give pills again or straight away do a surgical evacuation? What's your experience, sir?
Sure. So our experience is like this. Most of the times, if that patient does not have a gestational sac in the follow-up ultrasound, that means, for example, the endometrial thickness is say 6, 7, but it is still reported as retained products of conception. If she does not have any bleeding, if she does not have any bleeding means if she does not have heavy bleeding, If she doesn't have a foul smelling discharge or a fever, then leave that patient alone. There is good evidence to show that what looks like retained products of conception are not, they are actually decidua. So if there is no gestational sac, the approach to that patient is completely different. If, however, there is a gestational sac and your patient has already taken mifepristone and misoprostol, my personal choice would be a surgical abortion under ultrasound guidance. I wouldn't be very comfortable doing a mifi-meso procedure again. So it all depends not on the diagnosis of retained products on sonography, but on the presence or absence of the gestational sac. So if there is a sac, the approach is different. If there are only some products still in the cavity, the approach is completely different.
Right. After how many days after LSCS can we provide medical termination? Minimum how many days after LSCS can we provide medical termination?
There's no real rule for that, to tell you the truth, but you would expect that the patients would not get pregnant for the first 3 months at least after cesarean for various reasons. Lactation and being aware at their mother's house and so on and so forth. So our rule of thumb is 3 months, but I don't think there's any good data to show that even before that you can't provide the abortion. Yeah. I would hesitate to do it before 3 months or over.
Right. 24 years unmarried girl has come with incomplete abortion due to self-intake of MTP kit, hiding all this from her parents. What to do?
Yeah. Again, it will depend on the presence or absence of the sac. So, if she has a gestational sac, then you will need to do a surgical abortion, and you can do that with her own consent alone because she's major of sound mind. Okay, and if she has no sac, then you can simply, and if she's asymptomatic for retained products, you can simply wait. There's no problem. But there is no legal consequence. I mean, if she were less than 18, of course, it would be a different problem. But if she is more than 18, then you treat her just like you would any other patient.
The signature of the patient on Form C does inform about the name of the patient. So still we need to write only the code in place of name and address?
Yes, in Form C, you have to write only the code. In fact, they say residing at and this and that and all that. But to my mind, you're already breaking confidentiality by doing that. But once she is entered in the register, all subsequent documentation should refer her only by code. So all subsequent documents includes Form C, admission paper, prescription, so on and so forth.
Okay. Dr. Priyanka Bansal from Haryana is mentioning that there is no forum to submit MTP pill data from clinics in Haryana, only from nursing home. Yeah. What should she do? She should contact you?
She can contact me, sure. We can write to the appropriate authority, or she can directly submit the data to the appropriate authority and take a received signature in the dispatch of a local ward office. That is what, there were some places in Maharashtra who were having that problem. I was on the district level committee for Mumbai district for almost, I think 7 or 8 years for, registering MTP centers. And at that time, all these questions used to come to us. So in Maharashtra, what we had told them was that you just go to the appropriate authority or your ward officer and submit the report to them and take a received sign. That's all.
Right. In second trimester abortion, can we put it on paper of mentioning the MIFI and meso use? Can we mention on
excellent, excellent question actually, and a bit of a tricky question also.
Yes.
Because the drug controller currently allows us to use MIFI and meso only up to 9 weeks. However, remember that the drug controller gives the indication for use. It does not say whether the drug is legal or illegal. What it says is whether the drug is off-label or on-label. And there is a very big difference between what is off-label and what is illegal. So there has never been a test case where a doctor has been accused of using mifepristone and misoprostol off-label and said that because you use MIFI-meso, it was a problem, so I'm going to punish you for using MIFI and meso, because there is more than enough evidence to support the use of MIFI and meso by way of government documents. There are 5 to 6 guidelines of the government itself which say that using MIFI-meso is the safest way of providing second trimester abortion. So we, for example, we write on the paper that we have used mifepristone and misoprostol, but you may elect not to, and you may write, Serviprime or whatever. So there is no very clear answer to this, but be right, Miffy and Muso.
Okay. Is it safe to use MTP kit near 20 weeks IUFD with previous LSCS?
Absolutely safe. And no change in the dose or protocol is required. Remember, an IUFD by its very nature is a very, very soft fetus. And chances of having a rupture with that kind of a fetus are extremely low, even at term. So you can very safely use it. There's absolutely no problem. And moreover, you can use it in the same dose as you would for any other case.
Okay. Do we need to call an anesthetist for surgical MTP, even if it is done under a paracervical block or IV sedation?
Okay, there are guidelines for this, government guidelines, excellent guidelines, which say that the preferred way of doing a surgical abortion is under local anesthesia. But these guidelines are specifically written for our country where there are several low resource settings where anesthetists are simply not available. So, I mean, as I said, it's just like ultrasound. You know, if you need to do it, you can go ahead and do it. Technically, legally, you're not wrong in doing it. But if you have access to an anesthetist, you should call an anesthetist. For example, we don't do surgical abortions under local anesthesia. You know, in 2002, I started working in the NTP committee when Noza Shahryar was the chair. And at that time, we used to do these live workshops, MVA workshops. And we used to do all the abortions under paracervical block. So it's not that I'm not used to doing abortions under paracervical. When I was at Wadia as a resident, I used to do paracervical. But in private practice, I'm not sure how well the patients will tolerate. So we always do it under GA now. But if you do it under paracervical, you're not called an anesthetist, you're not doing anything wrong. But as I said, if you have access to an anesthetist, you might as well call them.
Okay. Do we need to display in OPD that the center is registered for MTP?
Yes, you're supposed to display your MTP certificate. Just like you're supposed to display a PCP NDT certificate, you're supposed to display the MTP certificate.
Yes. In old dispensing, even the visiting hospital has to be registered for MTP? In old
I'm sorry, I didn't get it.
Even in old dispensing, even the visiting hospital has to be registered for MTP. I don't get this.
Old dispensing means?
Even I don't know. The name is also
okay,
not.
I presume that if somebody is in the OPD and you're dispensing.
It must be OPD, not old. In OPD dispensing.
So if you're in the OPD and you're dispensing, either you need to register the hospital in which your OPD is, or you need to display that certificate which I said, saying that you have access to a registered clinic in case it is required for a complication. So no, technically you don't need to register as long as you display the certificate saying you have access.
Okay. Here I would also like to recognize the presence of Dr. Lakshmi Shikhande, past VP Foxy.
Yes. Hello, madam. How are you?
She was here. I don't know. She's on mute. Safety of Miffy and Meso in post, you have covered that. In COVID era, MTP is considered as an essential service, whereas tubectomy is considered as an elective procedure. What if the patient wants both?
You can do it. Nothing stops you from doing it. Just because it is not considered as a time limited or a time sensitive procedure. If you're doing any procedure along with an MTP, you can go ahead and do it. And nothing stops you from doing it.
But what if some complication occurs during the procedure? Will it be considered as because TL is a family planning program of the government. So will the doctor land in a problem if some complication
you will always land in a problem if there's a complication with TL. As I told you, I was on that district level committee for 8 years and also on the quality assurance committee for Mumbai district for this maternal health. So we used to investigate tubal ligation deaths and so on and so forth. It's a double-edged weapon. I can share my personal experience about tubal ligations with you. When I started my private practice so many years back, I think 20 years back, we used to do something like maybe 8 or 10 tubal ligations every month. And in this day and age, currently, I'm doing something like 10 tubal ligations in the entire year. I'm hardly doing tubal ligations. Even 10 naseeb se, hardly ever we do tubal ligations anymore. I'm not saying it is because I'm scared of complications, but the fact of the matter is that there are so many better methods available for contraception now, rather than subjecting the patient to an operative procedure. It was okay in the good old days, but I don't think it's okay anymore. Hello, madam. Dr. Shikhande.
Hello, Jaideep. As usual, I have seen you working since last 20 years. And you are very passionate about improving the abortion services in India. Hats off to you.
Thank you, madam.
Yes. Thanks, Lakshmi, for joining today.
Yes.
In OPD basis abortion, you have told us to display a certificate. Is there a
Yeah.
prescribed format, and who will issue this certificate?
No, there's no prescribed format. On the Foxy website, there is a recommended format, but there's no prescribed format.
That's just a recommendation.
It's just a recommendation.
Yeah. Is police information required for medical abortion of a major girl who's unmarried for our safety?
No, absolutely not. Not for your safety, not for her safety, not for the police's safety, for nobody's safety. If it's a major girl of sound mind, please don't go to the police. You will unnecessarily get troubled yourself only. Okay, just go ahead and do that abortion. There's absolutely no problem.
No need. A consent of a relative or a partner, you've answered that. Not necessary in a second trimester abortion as well. Two
See,
previous
it's not
sections.
necessary, but a lot of people take it, and I have nothing to. I would not say that they're doing the wrong thing, because everybody wants to be safe in this day and age. But technically and legally, if you don't take that, you are not doing anything illegal. Let's be very clear about that.
Right. Previous section, two sections, medical abortion is safe. You have already mentioned that.
Yeah.
Primary unmarried 20 years comes with 10 weeks pregnancy demanding an MTP. How to proceed?
So she's primary, she's unmarried, and she's 20 years old.
Yeah.
And she is how many weeks of?
10 weeks. 10.
Oh, absolutely no problem. She's more than 18. She's of sound mind. You can go ahead and do that MTP just like you would for anybody else.
Right. Dr. Lakshmi only wants to know if a woman with two previous female children comes for an MTP at 16 weeks. What is your take on this?
I would go ahead and do the MTP. And I would not ask her whether she's had a sex determination or not, because if I ask her and she says yes, I'll get into trouble.
So in that, yeah. So should we keep their some ID like Aadhaar card and all for our safety?
Well, nowadays, for all admissions, we take an Aadhaar card, but it's not specific to MTP. But if you don't take it, it's not wrong for you not to do it. But I mean, we take it as a matter of routine, and that's why we continue. But suppose we do a medication abortion, then we still don't take an Aadhaar card or anything like that. Yeah.
Okay. And if you are prescribing medical termination, how can we be sure that it is a viable pregnancy if we have not done an ultrasound? And should it be recorded in MTP register?
Well, if you've not done an ultrasound, then you need to record it, because the element of wantedness is not there, and you don't know whether it's actually a missed abortion or not. So if you're not doing an ultrasound, it is safer to record it in your MTP register. Quite sort of clear about that. Yeah.
So your opinion about the role of oxytocin in second trimester terminations?
No role. With MIFI and Meso, it has zero role, and it will just add to problems with its synergistic effect with misoprostol. So don't use it. It's not required. If you would like to use oxytocin after the delivery as a contracting agent, you can. But I would rather put in 100 micrograms of misoprostol rectally after the abortion rather than use oxytocin.
Yes. Does Meso cause cervical tear in second trimester abortions?
If it is used in doses which are too high, yes, it does. It's sort of famous for causing what are called bucket handle cervical tears. But surprisingly enough, there is excellent experience and data to show that these bucket handle tears are for some reason avascular tears. So they don't really bleed a lot. I mean, it's almost like the cervix is hanging and there is a bucket handle of the anterior or the posterior lip, but it usually doesn't bleed too much. Having said that, you still need to suture it. But now when the protocols for misoprostol are very clear, and you know exactly how much dose to use, if you follow the protocol, you should ideally not see a single bucket handle tear ever when you do a second trimester abortion with misoprostol.
Yeah, this is another interesting question. If a patient comes with incomplete abortion after taking the pills from a chemist, do we still have to then fill an MTP register and all the forms, or just do a DNE?
It depends on whether there is a sac or not. If there's a sac, you'll have to fill the forms. If there is no sac, you should not fill the forms, because when you have seen the patient, she's just come with an incomplete abortion and she's not come for an MTP. So that patient is categorized as an incomplete abortion and not an MTP. So it depends on the presence or absence of the sac more than anything else. But there is a bit of a problem with all these patients coming from chemists, in the sense that you don't know when they come whether they have really taken mifimizo or not? For all you know, the chemist might have given them, mefenamic acid, or might have given them registron or something. How do you know whether they've actually taken mifimizo or not? If you look at the Indian Journal of ONG, you'll find so many articles which talk about side effects or adverse effects of patients coming with after ingestion of mifepristone and misoprostol. My question always has been that you are comparing the outcomes of patients accessing abortion on their own versus the outcome of a tertiary health center which is providing abortion. Okay, and that, according to me, any research-minded person will tell you is an unfair comparison. You are comparing apples to oranges.
Right.
You have to compare that patient taking mifimizo sourced from a chemist versus what else is available in the community, right? Then that would be a fair comparison, and then compare the outcomes of that. As I said, is it safer she takes mifimizo incorrectly, or is it safer that she goes to a dye and gets vinegar put in her vagina or a stick put in her uterus? I think it's really a no-brainer. And the other problem with all these studies is, how do you know she took mifi and mizo only when she came? There is no way, you don't do a serum test to know how much, what is the level of mifi and mizo, because it will have disappeared by the time she comes to you. So if she could have taken registron, she could have taken TIC20, she could have taken anything on this, great green earth. So, these papers at their very basic premise, according to me at least, are flawed. So when patients come from the chemist and they say they have taken abortion pills, you have to be very careful about what actually they mean. Do they mean mifimizo, or do they mean registron? Do they mean POS-NF? Do they mean mefenamic acid? Do they mean paracetamol? You simply don't know. So that is why I said that the presence or absence of the SAC is the most important thing. Okay, it's possible they could have taken registron, had a missed abortion on their own, and are now coming with incomplete abortion. So if there is a SAC, then you do an MTP. If there is no SAC, then you do an incomplete abortion. Bas.
Sure. Whether we should write name of the patient on discharge card or serial number of MTP?
Serial number. I think there is the law is very clear on that. But as I already told you, it causes a problem with, for example, where I practice in the next suburb, there are a lot of IT companies with their back offices and all, and they are all covered for pregnancy. So then the patients come and they ask me for the bill and this and that and the other. And when I give them a discharge card with the code, I explain to them, see, this is the legal requirement, so on, but I'm giving you a bill in your name, which is, again, it's stupid. You're actually breaking, technically you're breaking confidentiality here. So there is no real sort of a, very good way or a very clear way of doing this. At some point in time, you will find yourself in a bit of a quandary. Always err on the side of safety, and you should be all right.
Whether gynecologist is allowed to provide MTP services legally at multiple hospitals? Is it legally?
Yes.
Yeah. Is
Absolutely,
it legally?
no question.
Yeah. Is it legally okay to submit certificates of qualifications to register for the same at multiple centers?
You don't have to. You don't have to. For example, the example that you gave earlier, saying that in your hospital, your name is on the certificate. But that is because the hospital is registered in your name.
My name.
Right? So, although in the MTP Act, unlike the PCPNDT Act, the person providing MTP in that hospital does not have to be registered to that hospital. So I can go around doing MTPs all over the city without having my name on the certificate. So let's be sort of very clear about this. Only when you are seeking registration, the registration form needs the name of one qualified doctor for that person to recognize the place. That is why they ask for your name.
Right. Dr. Gitendra is asking a very important question: how to dispose of the fetus after abortion having a weight of 600 grams or more? What are the guidelines?
Good question, Gitendra. You want to answer it or should I answer it? Okay. So technically speaking, if the fetus is more than 600 grams, but if the gestational age is less than 20 weeks, and I'll tell you, we've had this problem recently where we had this patient, she was around 18 weeks of pregnancy. The weight was not 600, but they insisted that they want to take the fetus away for, the last rites. And so we wrote a letter to our appropriate authority here saying that we understand that this is not to be done and we are supposed to do disposal as per the biomedical waste rules and so on and so forth. But still the relatives want to take the fetus away. So what should we do? The appropriate authority gave the relatives such a firing that the relatives got scared and they said, all right, Baba, you dispose it as per your rules. So if she's less than 20 weeks of gestation, even if the fetus is more than 500 grams, you dispose it as per the biomedical waste rules. If she is more than 20 weeks, then obviously the permissions and this and that, etc. apply. In which case you'll have to give a disposal slip. I don't know why they call it that. It's a very crude term. Disposal slip. They go to the BMC, get the certificate, and then do the last rites.
Right. MTP kits are not available in Haryana medical shops. Can we procure it from outside legally in bulk?
You can procure them directly through the companies. Don't try to import them yourself. Get them delivered to your place with a check payment, and make sure that you maintain the register, etc. adequately. But you can stock these pills. You're supposed to actually.
For using tablet misoprostol in second trimester for previous 2 LSCs, is scar niche measurement useful before using meso? I have seen patients of scar dehiscence with use of meso in second trimester abortions, even with first 1 previous LSCs.
Yeah. So again, this pretty much depends on the dose of misoprostol that is used. There is excellent evidence to show that if you follow the protocol, you will never see a dehiscence in your whole life. Again, dehiscence, you have to see what it means. So many times we've done a cesarean for a previous LSCS, and when we open the abdomen, you see that there is only the peritoneum covering the uterus. Of course, she's not ruptured, everything is fine. So you lift up the thing, open the peritoneum and deliver the baby. So if I start calling that as dehiscence, then my incidence of dehiscence is going to be extremely high, even without labor. So it depends on a whole lot of things, but measuring uterine scar, the thickness of the scar, etc., is really not going to be of any consequence. If you stick to the protocol, you stick to the adequate dose, don't overdose misoprostol for the patient, both in terms of milligrams and in terms of giving misoprostol too soon. You have to look at both the things to know. I think Gitendra, you want to say something?
Yeah, yes, sir. Sir, actually, I wanted to comment on one question that you mentioned that when there is a patient who is unmarried above the age of 18 years comes for MTP, then there is no need to take any precaution and do MTP with the consent of the patient. That was your answer. But actually, according to Criminal Procedure Code section 357, which was included after this Nirbhaya case in Criminal Procedure Code, that is 357C, it mentions that even if patient is major, but if the pregnancy is the result of sexual assault, then you are supposed to...
but this is not an assault, no, Gitendra? If it's an assault, obviously, the Criminal Procedure Code applies. So, but over here, you don't know.
No.
Anyway, I agree. If there is a history of assault, then
I am not telling that patient is with a sexual assault, but why should not we take something in writing from the patient that this pregnancy is not the result of sexual assault, and I do not want to file any case against anybody in future, and I do not want to inform police. If that kind of writing is taken by the patient, that will definitely help you in future. That is my opinion.
I suppose you could do that. I will not say you can't do it, but I suppose you're a lawyer, so you will think
because
about
in most
things.
of the cases, when you do MTP in such cases of unmarried woman coming with boyfriend, later on they used to file case against doctor.
Well, in 22 years, Gitendra, so far it has not happened, and I've done my own share of...
We have come across at least 20
I'm not arguing with you, Gitendra, but my point here is that let's not add burden for women where it is absolutely not required. Although legally you may be correct, and you are saying it for protecting the members and so on and so forth, it should not be misconstrued to mean that it is an absolute legal requirement.
No, not legally. That is for safety.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Sir, it's 6:30 and I still have 150 messages in the chat box. What do we do?
Okay. It's up to you, Vaidehi. I'm fine.
I have around 250 doctors still logged in. Should we continue for some more time?
Yeah, I don't mind. It's up to you.
Okay, we'll just quickly go through some questions. Medical legal precautions for MTP in the cases of divorce.
Well, if she's as I already said so many times, if she's major of sound mind, what precaution will you take? She's already divorced. It's not that she's in the process of getting a divorce.
If she's in the process?
I don't think, as I said, legally, as long as she is an adult of sound mind, you can go ahead and do that MTP. Let me tell you that when I was in Wadia Hospital, we had done an MTP when I was in my first year of residency. And then in my third year, I got a notice from the court saying that, you need to come as a witness because this lady has now, filed for divorce. And in most of these cases, you are not called as having abetted the MTP. You're called as a witness to say that this person actually underwent an MTP. So it's a very, very, very different situation. And I don't think you should, again, as I said, put barriers for this patient. If she's an adult of sound mind, please go ahead and do the abortion.
What if we are referring a minor pregnant girl after diagnosing in the OPD to government hospitals? Do we still have to inform the police if she's a minor?
Yes. I mean, clearly you have to. It's your responsibility.
If we have refused many patients with 13 or 14 weeks with previous female child, as the second gynecologist refuses to sign.
Well, that's sad, isn't it? And that's part of the whole problem which the PCPNDT Act has created. But if you have only that one second gynecologist available and you can't get the signature of a second gynecologist, then you're not fulfilling the needs of the MTP Act and you should do the abortion. It's sort of very clear about it, but it's rather unfortunate if that situation comes. And, one hopes that it will improve and you are not faced with that situation.
Is it necessary to save the age proof of the adolescent girl if she says she is more than 18 years of age?
Okay, this is again a very tricky, kind of a question because who has the onus of deciding the age? For example, there is this girl, she says, I'm 19 years old. But you think that she's not 19 years old. Then you should try to get proof of age. It's not technically, legally required, but for your own safety, you can do it. As I said, now as a matter of habit, we are taking ID proof from all the patients. So you can do that and try and take it. But remember also that in the consent form, it is I so-and-so aged about so-and-so, and you can technically defend yourself saying that that patient has self-declared her age. But having said that, it will not stop you from encountering problems. So if you are in any doubt, take proof of age. I see no harm in doing that.
Right. A patient with just missed period with UPT positive, pregnancy not confirmed on ultrasound, no other complaints. Can we give MTP pills?
Technically and legally, yes, you can, provided you follow all the other legal tenements. But personally speaking, I don't do an abortion till I don't document the pregnancy on ultrasound. Remember, as a matter of policy, it is absolutely not required, but this is my personal practice. Till I don't see the pregnancy on ultrasound, I don't do the MTP.
Dr. Lakshmi Shrikhand again wants to know, how can we prove that the woman is of sound mind?
I think Madam will then start asking whether I am also of sound mind after some time. No, I don't think there is any way of proving this. The mental health argument, in fact, also does not require that you send that patient to a psychiatrist. If it's not 100% legally required that you do that. You can, on your own, make that judgment and provide the abortion.
Right. Can we prescribe tablet meso for few retained POCs, and what is the dose if we can?
If she has few retained POCs and she's asymptomatic, why do you want to give anything at all? She doesn't need anything. The bleeding will, if she's not symptomatic, there's no bleeding, the POCs will either probably come out or they'll get absorbed. There's no need to do anything in this kind of circumstance. If she is bleeding heavily, normally what we do is we do a CBC. If that CBC shows a hemoglobin which is low, then we do a surgical evacuation. We don't give misoprostol.
Okay. In more than 18 years of unmarried girl, do we need to take consent that she does not want an MLC? Why MLC?
That's what I was telling.
Yeah, for 18 years. She's more than 18 years unmarried. Yeah. Do we need to take consent that she does not?
No, I think that's not. I think Gitendra was suggesting that we do that, but I'm not very much of the opinion that you absolutely should do it. As I said, it could work as a barrier to providing that abortion. So you could do it, technically, sure, why not? But I'm not sure that it's absolutely required.
In a heart disease patient, how do we proceed for second trimester abortions?
Okay, I think that's a very good question because in heart disease, misoprostol is not supposed to be used very safely. There is some evidence to show that even for patients who have heart disease with no coronary insufficiency, you can use misoprostol for them. But for patients like these, what I would do is prime them first, give them Mifi, prime them with a small dose of misoprostol, and then do a surgical abortion. This would be my choice. DND would be my first choice, and I would prefer to do this under a regional anesthesia rather than a general anesthesia. So if there is no coronary insufficiency, this is what I would do. If there is coronary insufficiency, then I would use mechanical dilators and then do a DNE. I wouldn't use misoprostol first.
But how DNE in second trimester abortion, sir?
You know, when I was a resident in Vadia, we used to do up to 20 weeks.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Should the name of all the doctors to be present in the displayed certificate, displayed MTP certificate of the hospital?
No, not required. As I said, the name of the doctor is simply for the appropriate authority to be assured that the place is owned by a registered doctor, or a registered doctor is doing MTP in the place which is registered. You don't, as I already said, I can go around doing MTPs all over Bombay. My name doesn't need to be, even in one clinic. It doesn't matter. As long as the place is registered, you're okay.
Sound mind patient means patient should be on any psychological medication or what please guide. If a patient is taking mild antidepressants for some or the other reason, is she considered of a sound mind?
She is. She's under treatment, no? If she's taking antidepressants or she's taking antipsychotic drugs, etc., she's already under treatment with a psychiatrist. So obviously, if you want to have sort of what are called abundant precautions legally, you can get a certificate from the psychiatrist saying that she is of sound mind, and you can proceed.
So where can we access the MTP Act online?
Oh, all over the place really. Just do a Google search for MTP Act and you can download it. But I have found that the MOHFW website is quite comprehensive. You will get the Act, Rules, Regulation, 2002 Amendment, and the 2002 Gazette all on the same site. Maybe I can WhatsApp it to you. You can circulate.
Yes, sir. Please, sir. Thank you. What about MTP pills after 3 sections?
Oh, there's no real limit to it. As I said, the lower segment starts forming only at 30-32 weeks. So irrespective of the number of sections, it should ideally be safe. Yes.
I think you answered this. What is the minimum age for medical abortion? Overdue by 2 to 3 weeks. Should we wait for a week? So you said you prefer to wait. As you said, there is no need of a guardian consent in an adult, sound mind, unmarried girl, MTP. If unfortunately patient collapses on the table, then how should we tackle?
Again, that's what I'm saying. No? There is no end to the precautions that one can take, really. You see, and over here, as I already said, the MTP Act is a protective act. As long as you followed all the tenets of the MTP Act, you will be protected. The question you have to ask yourself is what will happen socially? For example, you might be worried that the patient's relatives will all come in a mob to your hospital and so on and so forth. So it's not legally required, again, let me say, but if you are going to do anything where a surgical intervention is required for an MTP, we will insist on the presence of one responsible adult along with that patient. It may be anybody, it may not be her husband, it may not be her father, whatever it is, but the presence of one responsible adult outside the operation theater is something we always insist on before we take the patient into the operation theater.
Okay. If 24 years old, unmarried primate, 12 to 14 weeks, comes to private practice with parents, wants MTP and says she wants to file a case against the against a partner, what legal precautions should be taken in this case?
Well, see, she's adult, she's major, she's of sound mind. So you have to separate the MTP from the action that she wants to take against the partner. But if she's alleging sexual assault, then she should always file the complaint first, so that the police is informed that she's going to undergo an abortion. So let her do that piece first and then go ahead and do the abortion.
So for a
Because over
consent,
here, indirectly, she's alleging sexual assault. So you need to protect yourself.
in case of a surgical abortion, should we take?
Basically,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
according to 357 subsection C of Criminal Procedure Code, it becomes duty of doctor to inform police in such circumstances when
That's what I'm
patient is
saying. You
telling
need
that
to
this is-
insist that she informs or you inform the police. So you should do that piece first and then do the abortion.
If I have to do a surgical abortion for a patient of an adult patient, who else can give consent besides the patient? Can her friend give her consent for a surgical admission?
Yeah, you don't need the consent per se. You just need that one responsible adult is outside the operation theater. If you take her signature, you don't lose anything by doing that. But you don't strictly need it. As I said, if she's adult, if she's of sound mind, then her own consent is quite adequate. But if she, for example, gets her friend along with her and you take that friend's consent, nothing is lost by doing it.
So when we do ultrasound, we record the name in the form, then mention number of MTPs done in the same form. Does it not defeat the confidentiality of the patient?
It does. It does. I agree that it does, and that is a loophole.
Even the same problem with Bandara gynecologists, the local civil surgeon people, they're asking them to enter all DNE and missed abortion in the same form.
Well, they shouldn't. If they write to us, we'll give them a proper opinion on why that should not be done.
Yes. Should we give a discharge card to each MTP patient or only those patients of missed abortion or a blighted ovum?
No, you have to give a discharge card to everybody. The only difference is that in the patient who's had an MTP, you need to preserve confidentiality, and in a missed abortion, you don't need to do that. But you have to give a discharge card. Yeah.
Yeah. Sir, if we don't do a scan in early pregnancy for MTP medical termination, and what if it's an ectopic? We will be in a problem.
Well, not necessarily, because again, I mean, and this is the question I'm asked all the time when I say an ultrasound may not strictly be required. So let me reiterate that I'm not saying don't do an ultrasound. I'm saying that the absence of ultrasound should not become a barrier providing the abortion. So, for example, as I said, that I don't do an abortion if I don't document a pregnancy on ultrasound. However, it does happen that sometimes you have an ectopic. So it depends on whether you've done a surgical abortion or you've done a medical abortion. Most of the times, these patients are already under medical attention, and it's very rare that these patients post-MTP, either medical or surgical, come up with a hypoperitoneum of some sort. They usually come with pain, and you are able to detect the ectopic in good time. And that's why it's important to look at the history, the gestational age, do a proper PV. So even if you're not an ultrasound, for example, she's a 6-week pregnancy, and you've not done an ultrasound, you're sure about the period of gestation, you've done a PV, you think that the uterus is around 6 weeks, you give her Mifi and Meso. What will happen? Will it change the course of the ectopic pregnancy? No, it won't. So when she complains of pain, etc., you will probably be able to detect the ectopic pregnancy. So in a large majority of patients, nothing happens. There is anecdotal, for example, I have this story about, I was giving this talk somewhere in Uttar Pradesh, and one lady, she got up and she showed me the tip of a cannula. And you can imagine that she knew I was going to come and give the talk. So she had preserved that tip of the cannula, and she said 10 years back, I was doing an MTP with that metal cannula and the tip of the cannula broke. How can you say that abortion is a safe procedure? So, so such things are going to happen in medical procedures. You cannot do medicine without having complications. But the fact of the matter is that these complications of these kinds are extremely rare. They are complications which are significant enough for a patient to lose life are really very, 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 very rare in an abortion. As I said, one newspaper in California compared abortion to tooth extraction and said that perhaps abortion nowadays is safer than a tooth extraction. I think that's hyperbole. I don't agree with it. But you must understand this. And sometimes, we forget that the cases of complications that we see are probably because of that abortion provided in an unsafe fashion. Rather than blaming the procedure itself, you should see where the patient got the abortion, how much misoprostol she took, and so on and so forth. And most of the times you'll find that protocols were not followed. For example, if she 6-week ectopic, She comes back after 2 days saying that, doctor, I've not had any bleeding after the misoprostol. Okay, so that should, get your antennas up, and such patients should then be subjected to an ultrasound, and in all possibility, you will detect the ectopic. All these problems might occur, but they are extremely rare, and it should not distract from the fact that nowadays abortion is in fact one of the safest medical procedures available to mankind.
Right. If a patient below 20 weeks comes with pain in abdomen, aborts spontaneously without any intervention within 12 hours of admission, should this patient be recorded as MTP?
No. She's a spontaneous abortion. How can she be an MTP? You've not induced the abortion, no? So it is a spontaneous abortion, then it's not an MTP.
Okay. If patient comes with emergency like heavy bleeding or shock-like condition, has taken MTP pills outside without knowing, is it assault, and how to proceed? How to proceed in such case?
So this is an emergency situation, and in an emergency situation, there is enough leeway for you to proceed and manage and save that patient's life, irrespective of what has happened in the past and so on and so forth. So this is a different situation. This is not an elective situation where the patient has come, you're not sure about sexual assault, so on and so forth. However, if she gives a history of sexual assault, I mean, she comes to you saying that I was assaulted or I was raped, and or the relative brings her because she's in shock saying that she was raped and she took pills and so on and so forth, you have to inform the police. But first, you have to save the patient's life. That is the most important thing. And then later on, you can go ahead and inform the police and do whatever procedure you like.
Yes. Are there any appropriate doses or protocols for doses of Mifimizo to be used in different trimesters?
Well, I think I already said that. In first trimester, we use 200 milligrams of mifepristone. And then 48 hours later, we give the patient 400 micrograms of misoprostol vaginally. You can use up to 600 micrograms in the first trimester. For the second trimester, we give 200 milligrams of mifepristone. And 48 hours later, we admit the patient. We normally admit the patient at night. And at around 1 o'clock in the morning, we put 400 micrograms of misoprostol. We then wait for around 8 hours. Normally, this is enough. If the patient doesn't go into labor, then we give 200 micrograms of misoprostol every 4 hours. And we have never needed to go beyond 2 doses of this extra 200 micrograms. But if the patient does not abort with this, after 3 doses, we usually stop. And then again, next day morning. I'm always asked, why do you put at 1 o'clock in the morning? The answer is that patients are likely to start getting pain, bleeding, and aborting within 6 to 8 hours. If I put it at 10 o'clock in the night, 6 to 8 hours means I'll have to go in the night to see whether she's aborted completely or not. So why should I get up in the night and go and see whether she aborted? I would rather that at 1 o'clock, the patient should get up and take it on her own, so that by the time she aborts, it's morning when anyway I have to go to the hospital.
Right. From which authority can we obtain the registration certificate for a private clinic? MTP registration certificate. Which
the appropriate authority, your ward officer.
Which is the appropriate authority? Probably that's what she wants to know.
You should just go to your ward officer. Normally, the applications are filed at the local corporation office, and then these go to the district level committee, which are established in each and every district. Previously, it used to be a state level committee, but after 2002 amendments, it got changed, and now you have to do it at the district level committee. It's not supposed to be a very difficult procedure now. I remember when, as I said, I was in the Mumbai district DLC for almost 8 years. When I joined, it's a bit of a funny story. When I joined, there was one application which was 6 years old, and it had not been processed. And apparently the reason was that there was a grammatical error in the declaration of the doctor. And what used to happen at that time was that it used to go from the doctor to the ward office to the BMC head office, from where it used to be sent to Mantralaya. Then the Mantralaya used to screen, authorize an inspection. Then it used to again come from Mantralaya to BMC head office to ward office. Then the ward officer used to do the inspection. Then after the inspection, again, it used to go back to all those 3 steps. So it used to take a very long time. But I'm happy to say that when I left the DLC after 7-8 years, there was not a single center pending for registration for more than a month. So the establishment of DLC is quite an important step. And if you don't have a DLC in the area in which you are, you should write to the appropriate authorities, because there are very clear guidelines on how DLCs are to be established. And they do make a lot of difference in the way registration functions. Vaidehi, you're on mute. I think someone's telling us to end the seminar.
This is the last question I'm taking.
Yeah.
And the chat box is flooded with compliments for you for giving so much of time, and they are so happy that it was such a wonderful deliberation. The last question, sir: vesicular mole of 8 weeks, whether it has to be entered in medical register?
No, absolutely not. It's not an MTP. I mean, as I said, the element of being wanted is not there, so no question. It's a medical condition. You need to handle it accordingly.
Right, sir. Thank you very much. I can't go on taking questions because the chat box is still getting many questions. I think we have to end here. This was an outstanding session, sir. My words fall short to thank you. And we have, I mean, far exceeded our time. It's almost 7 o'clock. We started at 4:30. Thank you so much, sir. I hand over the proceedings to Swati.
Yeah. Swati, before you say anything, thank you again to the NOGS. It's been a real pleasure. I love answering questions. I love speaking on this topic, as is quite evident. And also thanks to the seniors who joined in. I can see Dr. Srikhande. Thanks, Geetendra, for your inputs. And Swati, over to you.
Congratulations to Dr. Jaideep, Dr. Vaidehi and Nagpur team for organizing such a nice workshop webinar.
Thank you.
So this was the most interactive session so far since the time we started our DGO meets.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. It was truly a very exhausting for you session. But I think this is one topic wherein every patient is different, and we are always in two minds as of what to be done. So thank you for answering all the questions so patiently, sir. Thank you very much. Now I invite our secretary, Dr. Rajyasree Sengupta ma'am, for a vote of thanks.
Unmute, Rajyasree, you need to unmute.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Good evening, everybody. Wow, it's finally evening now. We started in the afternoon. So 2 hours and still going strong. I think that is the charisma of Dr. Jaideep Tang.
No, thank you.
I think his authority and his command over the topic reflects in the effortless ease with which he was speaking for last 2.5 hours. Sir, thank you very much for all your inputs. And patiently answering all the hundreds of questions today. We do have some take-home messages from your talk. We will surely download a copy of the MTP Act. And very important few things that you have suggested. One thing that struck my mind was second trimester MTP should be offered as soon as possible and as late as necessary. I think these are words of wisdom from your talk. Really appreciate. Thank you so much to all the viewers who logged in and stayed online for listening to sir. I am sure you have loads of questions still unanswered, and as I could see few comments in the chat box that they want more. So maybe we can plan one more session with sir next time.
Sure, my pleasure.
And once
that will
again,
be only question and answer.
Agreed. Thank you so much, Dr. Swati, the chairperson of our digital meetings, for once again giving us a fantastic and seamless digital experience. Really appreciate. There are 2 numbers written in the chat box for everybody who wants to secure the ICOG credit hours. So you are requested to send your details like name, registration number, mobile number, and your email address on only those 2 numbers. Please do not write it in the chat box, as the chats will get deleted and we will lose on your details. So thank you everybody and have a nice one.
Yeah, before going, just 2 announcements. Generally, we upload all our CMEs on the NOGS official Facebook page. So you can search for the NOGS Facebook page, and you can watch all our CMEs there. And secondly, those who are from outside Nagpur and want information about our future CMEs can leave their name and number into the chat box. We'll be sending you the message and regarding our future CMs. So we'll be waiting for another 5 minutes. The ones who have already put in their name and numbers can leave the meeting. And those who wish to get more information about our future CMEs can just put in their name and number into the chat box. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Thanks again for joining in. Thank you everyone who have joined us today. For at least 3 years, we still have around 112 people logged in. We thank you really heartily from the bottom of our hearts. This was one excellent session today. So interactive that this could have still gone on and on for another an hour, but maybe we can plan another session, just an interactive session. You all can leave the meeting now. We'll be staying logged in for a few more minutes because we want to note all the numbers who want future notifications. Thank you very much. Have a good day. स्वाति तो ले रही है स्क्रीनशॉट्स?
मैम वो मैं सारे चैट्स भेज दूंगी उसको तनया को.
Yeah.
Only those numbers which you are getting into the private box, you'll have to save them.
Yeah, अभी तक तो कोई private नहीं है.
Yeah.
Everybody is posted in
Yeah,
the
great.
common
So
box.
I'll send all the numbers to you.
Yes. Last CME के बाद भी बहुत बड़ा broadcast list ऐड हुआ है अपने messages में.
It was great, ma'am. बहुत ही अच्छा हुआ.
Outstanding था यार.
Yes.
Every time I asked a question, I could show 156 new messages, 170 new messages. I didn't know how
he
to
gave more time for
handle
the
this.
question answers than his talk.
Sir was so patient, my God, with every question it took so long to answer.
So true.
Right. So the numbers are still coming in.
Ma'am, you can leave the meeting.
I can?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Swati. Bye everyone. Have a good day. Bye.
Bye.